At exactly 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, the Titanic fully disappeared beneath the surface of the Atlantic. In the pitch black, roughly 1,500 people were left thrashing in the ocean, watching the few launched lifeboats drift further and further away into the distance. This timeline graph illustrates the immediate physiological impact of cold shock. In 28-degree water, the body's temperature curve drops so sharply that for most passengers, the shock proved fatal long before they could drown. As the immersion continues, the cold rapidly paralyzes the muscles and forces blood away from the extremities to protect the heart. This defense mechanism is temporary. Within 15 to 30 minutes, internal organs begin to shut down, making cardiac arrest statistically inevitable. Out of the 1,500 people who went into that freezing ocean, exactly 4 would still be alive in the water by morning. Survival in these conditions required more than physical strength. Success followed a strict physiological rule. Every second the core stayed out of the water extended the survival clock. A few hundred yards away from the wreckage, Fifth Officer Harold Lowe was in command of Lifeboat 14, maintaining a safe distance from the active sinking zone. Lowe faced a brutal tactical dilemma. If he rowed his small wooden boat directly into the epicenter of 1,500 panicking people, his vessel would be swamped, capsized, and pulled to the bottom by the sheer weight of those trying to climb aboard. To manage the risk, Lowe signaled 3 other lifeboats together. He had the crews tie the 4 boats together with rope, then ordered all his passengers to transfer into the other 3 vessels. This left Lifeboat 14 empty, light, and highly maneuverable. With a crew of strong oarsmen at the ready, Lowe gave a difficult order. They were to hold their position in the darkness and wait for the screams in the distance to die down. Roughly 45 minutes passed as the thousands of voices in the water gradually faded. The silence that followed confirmed the reality for those left behind. Lowe's decision to delay the rescue was clinically detached, but it provided the only mathematical chance of saving anyone at all. Back in the debris field, the only way to outlast that 45-minute wait was to break contact with the ocean immediately. As the Titanic sank, a third-class passenger named Fang found a large wooden door that had been blown off its hinges. He crawled on top of it, pulling his chest onto the wood and keeping the majority of his body elevated above the freezing swell. Nearby, 23-year-old Harold Phillimore shoved his upper torso through a life buoy, using a small piece of floating wreckage to prop himself up. Charles Joughin, the ship's chief baker, took a different approach. Before the final plunge, he had returned to his cabin to drink a massive amount of whiskey. By the time he hit the water, he was heavily intoxicated. While it is a myth that alcohol keeps the body warm, biologically it accelerates heat loss by rushing warm blood to the skin's surface. However, the whiskey suppressed Joughin's central nervous system, preventing the fatal panic and exhaustion that killed others. Joughin treaded water for hours until he reached Lifeboat B. The boat had flipped upside down during the sinking, and Joughin clung to the side, eventually joining 30 other men who were balancing on the slippery hull in the freezing mist. These improvised micro-islands of debris allowed Fang, Harold, and Charles to stall the hypothermia clock. Every minute spent on the wreckage extended their survival window just enough to outlast the wait. Once the ocean fell silent, Lowe finally gave the order to row into the debris field. Lifeboat 14 moved through a sea of frozen bodies, checking for any remaining signs of life. Lowe swept his flashlight across the water and caught a reflection against a white wooden door. A shivering body was resting on top of it. Lowe initially hesitated, suspecting the man was too far gone, but his crew insisted on bringing him aboard. When they hauled Fang onto the boat, his clothes were frozen to his skin, but the sudden movement jolted him awake. Minutes later, Fang stood up and grabbed an oar, rowing alongside the crew to generate life-saving body heat. Shortly after, the crew spotted and rescued Harold Phillimore as well. Their survival relied on the intersection of 2 rare factors: their own determination to stay out of the water and the courage of the only lifeboat crew that chose to return. Around 5:30 a.m., daylight revealed the full scale of the disaster. Surviving lifeboats were scattered across the Atlantic, drifting miles apart from one another. Lowe's crew continued their sweep and discovered Lifeboat A, an unlaunched vessel that was completely swamped.
10 people, including Rosa Abbott, were found standing knee-deep in the freezing water. They were pulled to safety one by one. Nearby, Lifeboat 12 moved toward the overturned Lifeboat B. They hauled Charles Joughin and the remaining men off the slippery hull, packing their own boat dangerously close to the waterline to accommodate everyone. By 8:30 a.m., the endurance test concluded. The rescue ship Carpathia had arrived, and the final survivors were hauled out of the lifeboats and brought aboard. The sinking of the Titanic remains a study in systemic and mechanical failure. However, the timeline of the last 4 survivors serves as a final testament to the limits of human endurance, demonstrating how specific, desperate actions can stall a biological countdown, even when the margin for error is 0.